Chapter 6. Amon started the day by doing exactly what he had told Balashi he would do, mapping out the streets of Uruk near his home. He began by finding a reasonable source of clay not far outside the north gate, in a depression in the ground where rainwater collected. He made himself a tablet, cut a set of reeds, and then walked the streets, drawing a map in the clay as he went. 5 times he had to wipe out his map and to begin again. The hard part which kept bedeviling him was getting the scale right. He counted paces and set several of his reeds as measuring sticks, but even so, his map kept getting skewed. As lunchtime approached, he fought a mental battle with himself to decide what to do. Should he go to the temple on the off chance that the priestess would appear today? Or should he just give up on her altogether and try to avoid making a fool of himself? In the end, the boredom and the frustration of drawing and redrawing his map, as well as the loneliness of walking about by himself, convinced him to take a risk and go to the temple, though this time he took bread and cheese from the apartment larder. He promised himself that if the priestess hadn't appeared by an hour after noon, he was going to forget all about her. The garland of flowers he had made yesterday was still sitting on the wall at the pool of Inanna, and the flowers looked nearly as fresh today as they had been yesterday. He was trying to decide whether or not he ought to go through with his plan and give her the flowers, when the priestess arrived and sat next to him on the wall.
"Oh, little brother," she gushed enthusiastically. "I am so glad you decided to come today. Can you forgive me for not appearing yesterday? I had so much work to do that I did not have time to pause for even a second."
"You have been a negligent sister, and should have taken greater care of your younger brother," Amon chided. "But in the end, your negligence did not quite cost me my life, and since you have asked for my forgiveness, I find that I must grant it. In token of my forgiveness, here is a garland of primroses that I made for you." The priestess first set down the clay tablet she was holding, and then took the garland from him delicately.
"Oh, they are beautiful,"
she said. She placed the garland on her head and looked at her reflection in the water. Amon thought she looked like some divine water spirit. He took advantage of the opportunity to recite his sonnet for her, and was pleased to see the priestess blush with pleasure at his clever lines. When he was done, she shook her head.
"I'm not sure that this is any better than the blasphemous things you said to me yesterday,"
she told him.
"Your way with words is certain to be your undoing if you don't find a more proper way to channel your skills than flattery and undeserved praise."
"I assure you that I meant every word of what I said," he told her sincerely.
"No doubt you say that to all of the girls you charm like this, you rogue," she accused. "But be that as it may, you most certainly belong in an Aduba, where you could learn to be a scribe and render beautiful poems to the glory of Inanna."
"Beautiful poems require beautiful inspiration," Amon replied. "And I have already found my muse. Shall I recite my poem for you again, or make a new one to try to do justice to how beautiful you are with that garland of flowers? I swear I would have picked an entire field of them if I had known how well they would highlight your beautiful face." The girl blushed again, but shook her head.
"You have already flattered me quite enough, thank you. If you keep carrying on like this, I will begin to suspect that you're after something."
"Oh no," Amon objected. "I want nothing from you but a few moments of the pleasure of your company."
"It is just as well," she replied. "For I have no more than a few minutes to spare, but before I go, you must tell me, little brother, what exactly did you mean by saying that my negligence nearly cost you your life?"
This was exactly what Amon had hoped she would ask, as he was able to give a rather embellished account of his day yesterday. Sitting here in the bright sunshine, with this pretty girl beside him, appropriately gasping and eyeing as his story unfolded, he was almost glad that he had gotten lost and nearly killed yesterday. Just now, it felt more like a grand adventure than it did like a nearly fatal mistake. As he wound up his story, the priestess stood to go.
"I am so glad you weren't hurt," she said. "And I must admit that you entertained me with your story, but now I must get back to my work, little brother."
"Of course," Amon grunted magnanimously. "But first I must impose a penance for your shameful negligence, which you must admit is no more than just."
"Very well, little brother," she said, humoring him. "But I warn you, you must be most brief. I have much to do before the sun goes down today."
"First, dear sister, you must tell me your name. For though I name you matchless goddess in my mind, you have asked me not to blaspheme, so I must know how I should call you," Amon said grandly. She tried to hide her smile at his cheek.
I am known as Iltani en Inanna, though you, beloved brother, may call me Iltani.
Amon started a bit when she said her name, but he quickly regained his composure. Several key bits of information made sense now that he knew that this was the High Priestess of Inanna. 1,000 new questions arose, such as how someone as young as she came to hold such an exalted position, but there was time enough for such questions later.
Your name is as musical as it is divine, he said. And you need not fear, for though I could say 1,000 things about how apt it is that you are named for the goddess, I have sworn to mention none of them, and so I shall hold my tongue. Your penance, sweet sister, shall be designed to fit your crime. As you showed great negligence in caring for your younger brother, your penance must teach you greater responsibility in the future. Your mother Inanna and my father Enki would expect nothing less of you. Less levity and more brevity, dear brother, Iltani said impatiently. You must promise to meet me here by the pool of Inanna each day for a week, if only for a single minute, so that if the goddess should inquire as to my safety, you may honestly say that, like a good sister, you have ever kept me under your watchful eye.
Iltani visibly hesitated.
It's not that I don't think that you're in great need of supervision, she began. A single minute is all I ask,
Amon reiterated. Then he was struck by a sudden inspiration.
But, dear sister, I have been a poor excuse for a brother in my own turn, he said. Here you are, busier than a potter with 3 wheels spinning, and I have not yet offered to help. They say that many hands make light work, and so I offer you now my hands, the aid of your little brother in whatsoever task you may have need.
Iltani laughed unreservedly. It was a clear, lilting, musical laugh, more encouraging to Amon's heart than the sound of a dozen silver bells.
Ah, little brother, she said. It does my heart good to hear that a pair of hands such as yours is at my beck and call. If you truly knew how busy I am, you would think twice before tempting me so. And yet I do not withdraw my offer. In fact, I insist that you take me up on it. Here am I. Let me help you, dear sister. The gods have placed me here in your path.
Amon did his best to replace his light tone with sincerity. Iltani seemed unsure whether he was still joking with her, or if he really meant what he said.
And what task would you suggest I put you to?
She asked lightly, trying to recapture the air of mirth which had permeated all of their conversation so far. Amon pointed to her clay tablet. I could act as your scribe if you like. You yourself suggested as much. Writing is difficult and time-consuming, and reading is also no easy task. If that would lighten your load, I would gladly do it for you. Iltani smiled again, sure that he was trifling with her once more.
Ah, I see. You can both read and write.
He saw her take in his cheap woolen clothes.
Doubtless you have these skills directly from the gods, little brother.
Would that it had been from the gods, and not from the heavy stick my wicked tutor beat me with if I did not learn the lesson quickly enough for his liking, Amon responded. Let us see what matters of such great moment bear down on the shoulders of my dear sister, he continued, holding out his hand for the tablet. Certain that he would invent some outrageous tale from the tiny triangular markings in the clay, Iltani handed the tablet over and waited expectantly. Your Grace, it is with great satisfaction that I write to inform you that all of our plans have been carried out, and with greater success than we had dared hope, he read. Iltani snatched the tablet back from him, an expression of surprise on her face.
You really can read, she said,
her tone one of disbelief.
I told you as much, dearest sister, he replied in satisfaction.
She looked at him closely now, all playfulness evaporated. The kind light in her eye had been replaced by a calculating look.
Tell me truly now, in all seriousness, no folly and no lies, who are you and who sent you here?
By the throne of Enki in the Temple of the Deep Waters, I swear to you that no one sent me here, except your own kindly heart, which led you to give me a friendly word when my own heart was troubled and burdened with despair, he said. When that didn't seem enough, he added, I come from Eridu, where everything is in turmoil. The great houses there have turned against one another, and I had to flee lest I be killed.
Very well, little brother, that will do for now, but we will speak of this again.
Iltani turned to leave, and then turned back as if she had just remembered something.
If I am to consider taking you into my service, by what name may I call you? She asked.
Amon was about to tell her to call him Amon Shaw, but some modicum of caution still clung to him after the events of these last weeks, especially the close call last night. He was not ready to be completely open, especially now that he knew that this priestess was the High Priestess of Inanna. He reminded himself that he had once thought that Lipetenki was trustworthy too. "To my friends, I am known as Urma Ug," he said.
Urma Ug,
she repeated. She shook her head with a frown on her face.
You can't be serious for more than a moment at a time, can you? Well, I suppose Urma Ug is as good a name for you as any.
Then she strode away quickly, leaving Amon trying to figure out exactly how he should feel. These past few days, he had been unwittingly sporting with someone who may well be one of the most powerful people in the city. She seemed as open and kind and generous as her youth and beauty naturally led him to want to believe, but he felt sure that he couldn't trust his first impressions when it came to her. No, she had a spine of bronze, and it would be best for him if he did not forget who she was, and that both her loyalties and her agenda were bound to be very different from his. The next day, Amon spent a brief time familiarizing himself with the streets near their home, then made his way to the temple while it was yet early. He waited patiently at the pool of Inanna, hoping that Iltani would show up early as well. The morning dragged on later and later, turning into noon and then afternoon. Amon tried to be patient. He gazed deeply into the depths of the pool where he sat, and after a long time he saw things moving in the water. He watched more closely and saw that there were tiny creatures everywhere. Some of the larger of the creatures looked something like a grasshopper, while the smallest were nothing more than tiny, semi-transparent dots. Amon saw that the creatures had their own world, made in imitation of the world on the surface. There were creatures that grazed on tiny plants like rabbits, and there were strange insect-like things with great grasping claws that chased and ate the rabbit things. Observing the tiny world was absorbing. Amon found a group of creatures that behaved something like bulls, though they looked nothing like bulls on land at all, yet they had a snout and a tail. As he watched, he saw that a few of the creatures had claimed a small patch of ground in and among the rocks near the edge of the pool. He could see nothing that made one patch of ground different from another, but the tiny bulls clearly could, for they fought fiercely with one another to claim the best ground, and to defend it from the attacks of dozens of others. Amon chose a favorite champion from among the little bulls, one who was smaller than most of the others, but who was fiercer in his determined defense than bulls much larger than he. Amon named the little bull Google Anna, the great bull of heaven, and silently cheered the creature in his spirited battles. Google Anna defeated a succession of 3 competitors, one right after the other, and then, at last, Amon could discern the purpose for all of the ferocious clashes. Dozens of smaller sea bulls, which Amon reasoned must be the cows, timidly darted to the patch of ground defended by Google Anna and some of the other victors nearby. Google Anna and his companions followed swiftly after the cows. What was Google Anna doing? After watching for a time, Amon reasoned that he must be fathering children. "I wish you many tiny sons to carry your name and your great ferocity," Amon said quietly to Google Anna. "May whatever gods watch over you bless and prosper your union." Even after the cows had left, Google Anna continued to watch over his land, paying special attention to the place where the cows had paused and waited for Google Anna to cover them. Had the cows left something there? Amon peered as closely as he could, his nose nearly touching the surface of the water. There were tiny masses of something. Google Anna picked nearly invisible grains of sand from among the stuff and fanned water over the top of them. "They're eggs!" Amon exclaimed, for they were like the great masses of frog eggs that he had seen in the spring, stuck to reeds in swampy areas, only in miniature. With the battle between the bulls settled, Amon thought that perhaps Google Anna would rest, but the tiny bull had no such luck, for now Amon could see that other dangers had arisen. New creatures came into Google Anna's land, clearly intent on robbing him of his children. There were insect-like things and great monstrous fish 10 times the size of Google Anna, but the diminutive bull was not daunted. Like a great hero in the epics, Google Anna rushed into battle and frightened away the monsters with his raw courage. Sometimes these great monsters struck out with claws or snapped with their great maws, intent on disemboweling or dismembering the little sea bull. As it turned out, Google Anna was too quick for them. With no great teeth or claws of his own, Google Anna darted in and struck over and over with his blunt snout. Amon was entranced with how the nearly defenseless little seaball was able to defy death a dozen times or more, and still emerge as the clear victor each time, the defeated and humiliated monsters slinking shamefully away from the battlefield. But then tragedy struck. As Gugalana chased off a great armored thing with sharp claws, its eyes waving on long stalks, a more terrible monster than any of the others appeared. It was a toothed fish, 50 times or more the size of poor Gugalana. The toothed fish darted in and snatched up both Gugalana and the armored thing he had been battling. The beast threw back its head and swallowed Gugalana in a single bite. Amon was stunned. The poor little bull had fought like a hero, had driven off monster after monster, and yet the gods showed him no respect for all of his valor. His days had ended ignominiously in the belly of a great fish. Now the thieves would come in and snatch his children, devouring them so that not even Gugalana's seed would continue. Even now, a half-dozen of the slinking little cowards came investigating, fearful lest the wrath of Gugalana should appear and chase them off once more.
"No!"
Amon growled fiercely.
"You shall not eat his children!"
Amon reached down into the shallow water near the rim of the pool and waved his hand back and forth to frighten away the thieves. Then he collected dozens of rocks and built a great wall around Gugalana's home, shooing away the sneaking thieves that tested his guard as he stacked up the rocks. He grabbed scoops of mud and sealed the crevices between the rocks until there was a wall as great as that of Uruk, at least from the perspective of a tiny seaball, to protect the children of Gugalana. When at last he had finished his work, he spoke to the spirit of Gugalana.
"You were a hero, and you deserve to have a song made to remember your deeds. I have done what I could to protect your children. I will keep watch so that when they are born I may free them to go out into the wider world. You did all that it was possible for a tiny seaball to do, but it was not your fate to live to see your children and to train them in warfare. I salute your valor, and when I may I will pour out a libation to your memory. Hail, Gugalana, mightiest of the seaballs!"
Amon sat on the ground with his back to the low wall surrounding the pool. He reflected upon all that he had learned, and wondered that so much of what he had seen had its exact likeness in the human world. Gugalana had clearly been a mighty warrior and a king among seaballs. He had set up his small kingdom and had to defend it against assault from other seaballs, who would fain have stolen his kingdom, as well as against the creeping thieves who would have snatched whatever they could from Gugalana's wealth. Was it fortunate that seaballs did not cooperate to build greater kingdoms with other seaballs? Amon wondered. For if seaballs built great kingdoms together, most certainly there would arise traitors among them, seeking to overthrow the valiant kings like Gugalana in order to take the kingdom for themselves. The worst of it was that all that Gugalana had labored to establish was so easily destroyed by a single stroke of fate. Why was it that the great toothed fish had happened to eat Gugalana when there were dozens of his fellows scattered around within easy striking distance? If it had not been for Amon, Gugalana's entire heritage would have been lost with that one accident. And even with Amon's intervention, who knew if any of Gugalana's children would survive? Might they not need their father to pick out the tiny grains of sand the currents constantly brought into their midst, and fan them with his fins? Amon shook his head. Neither seaballs nor men could escape once fate decided that all memory of them was to be wiped from the earth. The thought made him feel both sad and powerless. But then, he realized, the entire epic struggle that he had witnessed had taken place in a holy pool created by Enki himself. Enki had taken care to show Amon these things so that he might become wise and understand both the nobility and the futility of man's struggles on the earth. Amon bowed his head and said a brief prayer of thanks to Enki, vowing to burn a stick of incense to him as soon as he could afford it. Then he began composing a song, the lay of Gugalana the Seaball, to memorialize the fallen hero, to lament the capricious nature of fate and the inevitability of death, and to pay tribute to the nobility of the struggle against fate and death and the need to leave a legacy that would be remembered and continue to live long after the hero died. Iltani found Amon leaning against the wall, his epic poem nearly complete and the sky golden and red with the dying sunlight. "What words rhyme with clash?" he asked her as she drew near and sat on the wall. "I don't know," she said. Bash? Brash?" "Yes, brash!" he exulted.
Kugelana was certainly very brash to take on the older, larger sea bulls, but it was this very brashness that gave him the victory and earned him the hearts of his many sea cows. "What on earth are you talking about?" she asked him. "Ah, dear sister," he said. "You have no idea of the legendary struggle that was fought here in the Pool of Inanna this day. A hero vanquished a dozen challengers and more than twice that many great monsters before he fell in battle to a sea beast greater by far than Tiamat the sea dragon." At her puzzled expression, he said, "Here, listen." He sang for her the epic poem he had composed. It was a bit rough, for it was the first time he had sung it out loud, but he thought it did a credible job of memorializing the deeds of the little sea bull. "Little brother, I fear that I have left you unattended here in the courtyard for so long that the heat of the sun has addled your wits. I have never heard of a sea bull, but even if I had heard of one, I am quite certain that nothing more than a few bugs and small fish live here within the pool," she said. "You have indeed neglected me once more, and after such a fine promise that you made only yesterday. But I don't have the heart to censure you, because I have been taught at the knee of Enki this day, and I would pass 100 such days neglected and alone in this courtyard if it were to yield such profound knowledge as I have been given," Amon replied. Before Iltani could respond, he continued. "Imagine for a moment that Enki sent a giant 300 feet tall to walk the earth. To such a being we would appear as no more than grasshoppers, and yet if the giant were to observe us closely, would he not see 1,000 triumphs and 1,000 tragedies in the city of Uruk in a single day? Should the giant ignore these dramas, and see only the meaningless churring of tiny insects, and then proceed to stomp on the city as he might choose to smash an anthill?" he asked. "It would be a great tragedy for us if the giant did so, but the giant and his friends might well spare the destruction of Uruk not a single thought, and forget in an hour that he had smashed the city at all," Iltani answered. "I can see what you're trying to tell me. You have observed the small creatures that live in the pond, and from their lives you have learnt a great lesson. I'm glad to see that you've spent your time so profitably." Amon smiled. "It is good to see that my sister is as wise as she is fair," he said. Iltani sighed. "Alas, I fear that I am not as wise as I have need to be. This is the very reason that I have so shamefully neglected you once more. I lack the necessary wisdom to make a decision that I fear may prove to be of great importance to us both." "Perhaps you have the wisdom, but need only explain the problem to another, so that the path forward may be more easily seen," Amon suggested. "Perhaps," Iltani agreed. "The problem is this. 3 different times today I had decided that I would send you away from this place and ask you to never return. Each time I was distracted by a problem which needed my attention, and so I put off doing that which I know must be done. Here, now, is the 4th time that I have decided to send you away once and for all, and yet, for me to see your sincere love for this tiny water creature has suggested to me that you are not what I fear you to be." "And what is that?" Amon asked, his heart in his throat. "A spy, sent by an enemy to gain my trust or to manipulate me," Iltani replied bluntly. "Why else would you come to see me day after day and assault me with your brazen flattery, doing your best to insinuate yourself into my confidence? You have a silver tongue, it is true, but your methods have not been in the least bit discreet." Amon gaped at her, closed his mouth, opened it again to say something, thought better of it, and then continued to gape. "You see," Iltani said, as if Amon had responded coherently, "all of the signs that you give may be interpreted 2 ways. Do you gape at me like a poleaxed ox because you are surprised that I have discovered your true secret? Or is it because you are genuinely shocked that I could believe such ill of my dear younger brother? My sister, I am at a loss for words, I admit, not because what you have said holds the least grain of truth, but rather because my brain is spinning, seeking some way that I might convince you that I wish only the best things in this world for you," Amon told her. Iltani sniffed. "It is sad that I must be so cynical, but when I first became High Priestess, I foolishly allowed myself to trust too easily, and many sad and painful experiences were required for me to learn that most of those who come to me pretending friendship want only to use me or destroy me." Amon nodded sadly. "It is due to treachery and betrayal that I lost my father and mother. Men are inconstant, changeable, and untrustworthy creatures. I don't blame you for your doubt." "You don't blame me, and yet you are so eager to convince me to trust you," Iltani observed. "How may I convince you of my goodwill?" Amon asked. "That is just the problem," Iltani replied. I don't believe that you can.
Amon nodded.
I think I understand. What is it that you think you understand? She asked. I understand that in a city it is very hard to trust a person you don't know, Amon said. My father had a saying he repeated to me 100 times. If a king has the trust of the people, he can always walk among them unafraid. But if a king is a wicked man, even if he has 10,000 guards, his life will always be in danger. But my father was wrong. Even if a king has the trust of his people, if he rules in wisdom, metes out justice, and honors the gods, even such a king can be killed by a single evil man with malice and envy in his heart. That is cynical, but I fear it is true, Iltani agreed. It is worse when men gather in a city, Amon continued. In a village, everyone knows each other. If a man robs his neighbor, he cannot enjoy his ill-gotten gain, for everyone will see that he has a new thing and they will know that he stole it. But in a city, a man may steal and it will not be known. A man may murder, and his murder can be hidden. When men do not know one another, what is to stop one from stealing and fleeing in the night? Cities are a joke the gods have played on all of mankind. Men build cities to get gain and power, and then their riches attract the envy of other men, and they must fight for all that they have, or see it taken from them by another. But you yourself learned today that this is not true, Iltani said. Cities are not the only places where cheating and stealing takes place. Did you not say that even your little sea balls fight for all they are worth to take land from one another, or to win the hearts of the sea cows? Yes, Amon agreed, a bit puzzled at the point that Iltani was trying to make. And did you not tell me that your sea balls do all things even as men do, that this was the great lesson that Enki taught you? Yes, Amon agreed. Then you can see that not even a village, not a tribe, nor yet even a single sea ball will ever be at peace. Your sea balls taught you that if one man has anything more than another, even if it is a barren rock with a few bits of green clinging to it, or if it is just the heart of a sea cow, then another will fight him and maybe even kill him for it. Amon was shocked by her level of cynicism, but as he thought about it, he realized that she was right. Truly, Enlil was justified in his desire to wipe the stain of humanity from the earth in a great flood, he said. Not only humanity, Iltani continued, but even the cold heart of a tiny sea ball is full of lust and covetousness and rage. The great Gugalana whom you celebrate in song won his fame by forcibly taking the best land and then beating back all of the other bulls who dared object. He stole the hearts of all the prettiest sea cows, and then drove them away after they had given him all the fine sons and daughters that he could ask for. Amon felt his head droop in despair. Everything that you say is true. It had been better for this world if life had never been created. Amon was surprised to feel Iltani strike him a sharp slap on his leg. No, it would not have been better, you great lummox, she said vehemently. For in all of your philosophizing, you have forgotten the most important thing. What is that? He asked. Love, she said simply. Amon shook his head. Love is just another kind of human folly. Iltani shook her head. You are in the Temple of Inanna, she reminded him. And the true worshippers of Inanna learn all about the different kinds of love. Love may indeed begin as a folly, as the blind, heedless attraction that draws men and women together, but even blind passion can become the love that binds a family to one another, if they choose to make it so. Your little sea balls can feel the pull of the need to mate, but will they afterward choose to say kind words to their chosen one, to provide comfort and care and a tender embrace outside of the bonds of passion? Perhaps to a sea ball tender words and embraces mean nothing, but staying to care for the eggs after they have been laid is the pinnacle of love, Amon mused. It may be so, Iltani agreed. But will your sea cows nurse each baby after it hatches at her breast, teach them to smile and to laugh and to know the joy of a family? Will your heroic sea bull help his sons to learn how to walk and to talk and to care for their sisters? Will he hug his son when he cries, wipe away his tears when he falls? But what strength has love against the dark hearts of the evil men, the ones who will destroy anyone who stands in their way to get what they want? Amon argued. Iltani laid her hand on his shoulder. The only strength that matters, she said. For without the strength that comes from love, no man or woman has the power to stand against evil. Amon nodded. It may be that you're right, he allowed. I must think on it. Think on it while you hurry home as fast as your feet can carry you, Iltani said. The night is falling fast, and as you well know, the city is dangerous at night. I will hurry, Amon said. But first, I must know, am I to be sent away, a victim of the mistrust sowed by the evil men who have hurt you, or am I to return again tomorrow, to help you as I may? Iltani stood looking at him for a long moment, staring into his eyes as if she could see the good or evil that was written in his heart. At last, hesitantly, she said, I will open my heart this one time more. My head counsels me against it, but I will put my faith in my goddess, that it is she who has seen my need and sent you to aid me, rather than an enemy who has seen my weakness and sent you to betray me. Amon impulsively caught her up in a hug. Fear not, dear sister. What is a brother for, if not to ward the danger that threatens his family? Most sisters I know say that their brothers take great joy in annoying and tormenting them, Iltani replied skeptically. But how else would our sisters know that we love them if we did not torment them now and again? Amon said, with a wicked grin, and then he reached up and grabbed a handful of her meticulously curled hair and gave it a sharp tug. Ouch! Iltani cried, outraged. Then she reached out and gave Amon a slap which he pretended to try to dodge. Amon looked up at the purpling sky and sighed. I fear that I have stayed too long, he said. When I come tomorrow, don't make me wait all day to see your fair face. Amon turned to go, and had already rushed to the foot of the broad stairs, when Iltani called out, Wait! Amon turned back to see her hurrying toward him. I would be a poor sister indeed if I let you risk your life alone again, she said. She walked with him to the gates of the temple, then turned and beckoned to the 2 guards who stood nearby. Please accompany this boy to his home and make certain that he comes to no harm, she requested. The guards made no reply, but slapped their fists to their chests with a solid thunk, then turned to look expectantly at Amon. Good night, dear sister, Amon said with a grin. Then he jogged out the gate, forcing the guards to accelerate to an undignified trot to catch up to him.